Honestly, at this moment in time, British politics has become so delicious and interesting, I'm running out of ways to phrase just how ridiculous it is. We could start by talking about Sadiq Khan's desire to basically turn London into a nanny state by reducing the speed limit around the city to 20 miles per hour. Not that many get past 2 miles per hour in the first place. And since there is an increase in cyclists because of Boris Johnson's hard work to do that, I see this as nothing more than a money-making exercise designed to fleece drivers. Sadiq Khan, everyone. A man of the people. What a fucking idiot. Now the subject of today's video is going to be another fucking idiot. It's going to be Theresa May. You see, something I didn't know until I saw an alert on my tablet and then on my phone, and then I heard Nigel Farage talk about it on his LBC exclusive show. I would play a clip, but LBC are as fickle as the BBC and ITV and any other major company that just loves that copyright. So instead I'll just show the thumbnail and we'll move on, where he discussed what Theresa May was doing, how this affected, for example, the Brexit Secretary's position, who did talk about it in a select committee, and I will play a clip of that now.
I mean, there's been a Prime Ministerial statement, which I know colleagues have come on to, saying that the Prime Minister is now the lead negotiator and the Secretary of State is deputising. So has there been a change then? So does that mean the Prime Minister may be negotiating with Michel Barnier now directly?
I doubt it. She has met Mr Barnier in the past a couple of times. I don't rule it out in the future, but the key interlocutor for Mr Barnier is the Secretary of State, as his predecessor was. What the Prime Minister means, I think, is what she has meant all along, which is that the overall strategy for and conduct of these negotiations she regards very much as her personal responsibility, now with the Secretary of State very close at hand.
Okay. And then,
would it be helpful if I just gave a slight supplement to that, because there's been a lot of speculation about this. We're very keen, and Ollie and I have been working very closely together from day one to make sure there is one team, one chain of command, that we get the very best from our brilliant civil servants, and that we've got full assertion of ministerial accountability. And I think that the written statement that the Prime Minister has issued today makes that very clear, so that there can be no doubt about it.
Okay.
There is some changes and some shifting of the Whitehall deck chairs, but the ministerial chain of command and the crucial importance of us working very closely together and having one track is vitally important.
Dickhead, you're such a dickhead, and everybody knows it, everyone but you're a dickhead. I hope you'll soon be dead.
But also about what this means for Theresa May and her future, whether it is time for her to leave or not. And the majority of those that he spoke with said yes, she should now leave. It's over. You're done. I have made quite a number of videos recently talking about how useless she is. And not just on this channel, but on my second channel, where in Prime Minister's Questions she has shown herself to be remarkably weak and incapable of thinking on the spot, just like the opposition, where virtually every answer given is scripted, which is unfortunate because if it wasn't, you'd think that by listening to the answer, a suitable response could be conjured, created even. I said conjured a lot recently. I'm going to stop saying that. Now my point stands. Theresa May has shown herself to not be very good at what she does, and a fantastic point Nigel Farage brought up was that Theresa May promised a Brexit person would be negotiating our exit, which is why David Davis was our negotiator. So when he resigned, she had no choice but to appoint Dominic Raab. But with today's change in policy, Theresa has shown herself to be either short-tempered, fickle, or has decided that only she has the capacity to truly get what is best for Britain, which I'm not entirely convinced she can, what with her being an ardent Remainer, and also being totally incapable of doing the most basic thing, like negotiate her way around a very small portion of chips and a cup of coffee in one of those crappy paper mugs. Not that that particular false equivalent should in any way be an indicator that, as she can't negotiate her way around that, she should be able to then negotiate our exit deal. I'm not apologising for Discord. So, today's article is going to come fresh from the BBC, as I think that will be a better place to start for this. Theresa May is taking personal control of Brexit talks with the EU, with Dominic Raab deputising for her. Essentially, he is doing a job he is no longer required for, which is it. Mr Raab was drafted in as Brexit Secretary to replace David Davis, who quit in protest at the Prime Minister's proposal for post-Brexit trade, which is the White Paper, which is a betrayal of the vote. A lot will then say, and have always said, well, we didn't agree on the terms of our exit. You're quite right. But as I continue to say and will continue to do so, leave doesn't mean remain. A special unit in Mrs May's office has played an increasing role in Brexit talks during recent months. Micromanage much? Tuesday's announcement in a written statement by Mrs May formalises that shift in responsibility. Labour's shadow Brexit minister, Jenny Chapman, said, Dominic Raab has been sidelined by the Prime Minister before he has even had the chance to get his feet under the table. In fact, you can trace this back to last week's PMQs, where Jeremy Corbyn pointed out that Dominic Raab hadn't attended the first meeting of negotiations. Now granted, he was at a think tank, but now we know he was never needed in the first place. And if the Prime Minister intends to push forward with this idea, she is now ignoring the will, not only of the people, but of quite a number of her own cabinet. Mr Raab, who was a leading figure in the Leave campaign in the 2016 EU referendum, insisted he had not been sidelined. Well, of course, on the face of it, he wouldn't say that, but let's face it, he has been. He is now second fiddle to her, because apparently only she can negotiate the best deal for us. I don't know if she's ever negotiated something for us before, and I'm not saying Dominic Raab would have been a better choice, but even in your job, even in your previous job, you've never had to do anything like this. Nothing could be compared to it. And I'd also point out, you being a Remainer, Theresa May that is, were never the right Prime Minister. To begin with, your deal would see us tied to the EU. It would see us abide EU laws even under a transition period. It would see us raise our own standards to theirs, even if they are utterly unsustainable, in the long run especially, cough cough, agriculture, cough cough, to the point where if we don't obey their rules, we get punished for it, even though we are not amenable to them. The term vassal state has been thrown about, and it is absolutely correct. The Europe unit led by senior civil servant Ollie Robbins in the Cabinet Office, which reports directly to the Prime Minister, will have overall responsibility for preparation and conduct of the negotiations. DEX-EU, Department for Exiting the EU, will continue to lead on all the government's preparations for Brexit, domestic preparations in both a deal and a no-deal scenario, all of the necessary legislation, and the preparations for the negotiations to implement the detail of the future framework. Well, that's a very convoluted way of saying we're just going to bend over. Now, it's interesting to point out now that Dominic Raab did in fact say in a televised interview, which I'm not going to play a clip of because I will get copyright struck, that the EU needed to show some flexibility because no deal was becoming more likely, and that the 39 billion euros that they wanted, or was it pounds? I guess if it was pounds it'd be higher. It might be pounds. There's less chance of them getting it if they don't start being more flexible. And they're the ones playing chicken with us here. Do you remember that game? Yeah, they're playing chicken with us. See who blinks first. Essentially. And that, yes, that's a different game. Mrs May said that the Department for Exiting the EU would recruit some new staff to work on preparations for Brexit, while a number of Cabinet Office officials would move over to the department. There would be no net reduction to staff numbers in Mr Raab's department, a redundant department if she is micromanaging this. Honestly, all of this comes as the government published a white paper saying how the UK's EU withdrawal agreement will be put into law. Mr Raab said the proposed withdrawal agreement and implementation bill would deliver a smooth and orderly Brexit, but it wouldn't. The word Brexit means Britain exit, but what is being written in the white paper is remain. Yeah, I just coined that. Or did I? Maybe someone else already has. Doesn't matter. He said it would kick in only once MPs had given their backing to any deal struck with Brussels in the autumn. If there's no deal, it would not be enacted. Also interesting to point out, on that Nigel Farage LBC show, a Remain voter did call an ardent Labour supporter, and they did make it quite clear that it's now going to be impossible to get through anything that would be considered a hard Brexit. And he's right. It won't get through Parliament, because Theresa May has done such a bad job of this, and the only way she'll get her current deal through is through Labour votes. But Labour are so petty, I don't think they'll do it. I think they'll embarrass her in a way that would end her political career, unless this does, of course, first. The legislation would amend some parts of the EU withdrawal bill passed last month after a series of knife-edge votes to ensure the UK statute, book, continues to function during the 21-month transition period. It would not end the supremacy of EU law altogether on the 29th of March next year, as promised in the EU withdrawal bill, and the continued jurisdiction of the European Courts of Justice until December 2020, among other things. Labour's shadow Brexit Secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, said it was now clear that the EU Withdrawal Act will need major surgery, adding that the 29th of March Brexit Day was a gimmick, which had come unstuck. I can't remember legislation which had needed such revision and amendment before the relevant parts had even come into force. The new bill would create a financial authority to manage divorce payments which will total £39 billion to the EU and aim to protect citizens' rights. With what Theresa May is currently doing, I am not convinced that we will leave the EU, and I am now less of the opinion that will remain, but instead she will add a little extension onto the Article 50, anywhere between 12 to 18 months, I reckon. This is supported by a number of people, including Nigel Farage. Whether you like him or not, this idea is starting to make more sense, like it has a possibility to it, which I hope is not true. But, so late in the game, coming up with a new idea for trade, the Brexit Secretary who had been so for such a long time, walking away because it was such a bad idea, it is right to assume that this is not going to end well. And I will say now, if Theresa May does slap an extension on this, she's done. It is officially over for her. There is no way her political career continues because of that. It is an absolute betrayal at that point. So, now that I've gotten that out of my system, I hope everyone has a lovely Wednesday, and thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddowns.
In your arse.
Imagine my shock